Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
What's going on? I know you.
Hey, late night edition.
Look at this guy.
Fresh off the bench. Let's do it.
Look at this guy. I can't get enough. I can't get enough of my Josue fix. Yeah, we're on
back to back.
We're on the what time is it where you are?
11:30. Well, only an hour behind.
You're an hour, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is what happens. Celtics go out west. We got to I need to import people from different time zones. Jimmy Toscano, Sherrod Blakely, weak. They're just weak stock. They can't do it.
Give them the rest. It's all right.
Huh?
It's the end of the road trip, so I get it. They're exhausted.
I'm exhausted. How many of those guys got 3 young kids? Not Toscano, I'll tell you that.
John, were you in Gillette not too long ago? I think I saw you with the breaking news. Yeah,
I was there all day. Yes, I was there with Bedard and I did a live pod there, and it is what it is. But anyway, I digress. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares about how tired we are. Some people were questioning whether we're gonna do this show. Yeah, we're doing this show, and yeah, Josue's back. Why not? He's here. He's hanging out. We're gonna talk about it. Bobby and Noah are in Denver. We're going to hear from those guys in a little bit and talk about a win. They got a win. It wasn't in the bag. He did a nice 15-0 run there in the fourth quarter to finally get it done. We'll talk about this game and kind of the whole road trip and what everyone's takeaways are and just kind of state of the team right now. Feeling good, feeling I saw Kristaps Porzingis just did an interview with the TV crew on NBC Sports Boston. And he said he gave them a 7 or a 7.5 for this road trip, which I think is fair. So we'll talk about all of that. I want to tell you real quick that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code CLNS, get 50 instantly when you play $5. The show is also brought to you by Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it, Josue? It's game time. Come on. You're rusty. You haven't been on.
Oh, it's game time. It's game time.
You haven't been on a little while. We'll let that one slide. So I'll just get your general takeaways. And again, just setting the stage for this game. Celtics were in a bit of a dogfight here. They had a really good first quarter. Things went dormant in the second. It was, through much of the third, this was a game until they put it away in the fourth. Your overall impression?
Great bounce back win.
And again, Nikola Jokic did not play. We should
that's a big part of it, man. I think this thing could have went down to the wire if he was in the mix, obviously, because you got to credit Denver because they made a lot of tough shots, especially in that first half. Obviously made it interesting. Even when you thought the Celtics were going to get away, they kind of did it it didn't happen really until the second half. So you credit Denver for that, but at the same time, the Celtics, you never really got the sense that they were going to, lose this game or even come close to it because guys like Tatum, I feel like he bounced back in a big way. I thought Hauser was great off the bench as well. Drew Holiday hit some big shots, So I just thought while the Denver Nuggets were making some incredible shots that you're like, that's not always going to go down for you. The Celtics were making the more comfortable shots, They just seemed really in front of things and just you could tell that they weren't going to let this thing slide. But that's the kind of performance you want to see from the Celtics, whether it was Jokic in the mix, whether he's not, that type of bounce back coming from a loss, coming from what happened in OKC. I thought it was great. I thought it was a classic Tatum night. I mean, outside of what was it? He was 0 for 7 before he hit his first 3. Outside of that, he was solid. He was pretty consistent.
Might have been 0 for 9 before he hit his first, but it was
something like that.
He finished 1 for 9. So yeah, but it was
right. Yeah. I thought he was going to go, one of those rare offers, which I think he had earlier in the season, right? I think it was something like it had been like a season or 2 years and a half or something like that since that happened. But yeah, that wasn't the case. But yeah, look, the way the fourth quarter played out, it didn't surprise me. You got Jamal Murray getting frustrated with the referees with certain calls and stuff like that. You could tell they were really It was just too much for them to handle. And that's what you're supposed to do when there's no Jokic out there. You got the size advantage. You saw what Porzingis did. You know, he was getting the free throw line as well, taking advantage of those mismatches. Outside of taking one in the cubes in that first quarter, man, that was oof. And you know, if you didn't see the replay, you thought he was hurt for a second.
I knew right away.
You knew right away? I didn't know.
Right away.
Like, oh,
I knew right away.
Bad.
He wasn't grabbing at his leg, and he was doubled over a little bit. I was like, he got it right in the seeds. You know, like
see, I'm thinking.
My favorite thing is how many different ways we're gonna avoid saying nuts. You know, because it's like everyone's like, hey, whoa, in the nether region, on the broadcast is like 50% of our audience knows exactly what that feels like. It's like people just can't say he got kicked in the nuts.
Yeah, right.
He did.
Cubes. I think cubes the PG way to say it. That's the one I like to go to. But yeah, got it right in the cubes. But man, I didn't notice at first. I'm thinking to myself, oh no, he didn't step on anyone's foot. You know, he didn't. One of those injuries, I'm like, that's not good. And then the second I saw the replay, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, good. I mean, not good for Kristaps, but good overall. And he came right back in, so that was good.
He did. It was a short break, and he was back in. They needed Kristaps, and again, if we're going to start at the beginning rather than the end, I think that's where you have to start because Porzingis was, borderline unstoppable there. He's using his size in the post. He's either able to get his shot off clean or he gets fouled like almost every freaking time.
Right.
He's in there because, he gets that free throw line catch on a switch against a smaller guy, and they're just doomed. There's really nothing they can do there. And they fouled him, and that was he was pretty big. He finishes over with 25, 9 of 18, but he had 15 in the first quarter alone, which was unreal. Defensive presence pretty good there as well, just in terms of being a shot deterrent. Plus 14 in 34 minutes. Again, anybody, if you're going to look at let's feel good about stuff, Porzingis is definitely in that category because we haven't seen him enough this year. We haven't seen him play consistently well this year. You've seen glimpses of it. So you'd like to see him kind of get back to that whole Porzingis can take over a game by himself sort of mode. So it was good that he was able to do that a little bit tonight, especially when some of the other offense was faltering outside of, Jayson Tatum. So, yeah, hats off Porzingis on a good game there. And again, should be pointed out, there's no Jokic there, which is, again, too bad because you'd like to kind of see that battle a little bit and how that game was going to go on tonight there. So, KP good. I don't want to get into the bad right away. I don't want to get there right away. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to let you decide what we're going to talk about next because I've got a couple of I'm going to go right away. Jaylen Brown finished, but weird stuff happened with Jaylen Brown. And again, we have the number somewhere. I don't know if we're going to get it. He went there. Here it is. Jaylen Brown, Sean Grandy put this out there, played 41 minutes and 31 seconds from the second quarter Sunday to the second quarter tonight without scoring a point. That's hard to do.
That's weird.
For Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, that's weird because he's trying.
What happened? That was weird. He wasn't trying. He had no field goal attempts. It was weird. It was like a Jimmy Butler protest game in the first half.
You think it's one of those? I don't know.
No.
I mean, not even a protest.
If you didn't know better, you'd be like, is Jaylen mad? Because he had like 2 assists. He had like 0 assists and 2 points. It wasn't like he was dishing or doing other stuff. He just wasn't doing anything. It was bizarre to see him that uninvolved. And then he just kind of woke up. And I feel like we've seen this from him at times where it's like, he's not there. Oh, there he is. Oh, there's the guy. He's one of the best players in the league. And other times, it's just bizarre. So again, I don't know what happened there. You have any kind of idea? You have any thoughts? Oh, we got Kata in the chat too. That's great.
I think it's one of those. Kata had a great game. I thought he was great around the rim. It's weird because I feel like he was just kind of just like going through the motions, but at the same time wasn't being like aggressive, especially after the first half we saw against the Thunder, right? I mean, because clearly he was trying to get his shot back in that second half, but then in this time around, sort of like he's kind of let everyone go. But I don't necessarily, I can't pinpoint exactly like the reason though. I just think it's one of those nights where he just kind of checks out sometimes. And I don't know how many times that's happened this season. I know there were some instances where, he didn't have a great shooting night. His field goal percentage has been off, up and down this year. But in terms of just like not even trying to be aggressive or trying to attack the rim, where teams, they're going to give you that opening. When he really wants to, he can get there, whether it's getting to the rim, trying to get to the foul line, or just trying to look for a shot. But he didn't do either tonight. Well, when you expect it, at least, I don't know, but it was weird. Yeah,
it was weird. And this is the area they struggled most with tonight was the non-Tatum minutes, and then that's where they got beat up a little bit. And that was with kind of Brown running the show, and that was a 2 years ago problem, not a problem last year, not a thing that we've seen. But Brown's been a little, inconsistent, not just game to game, but almost kind of like quarter to quarter, half to half. So there's been some strange stretches with him, and then sometimes he just goes into beast mode, takeover mode, puts his head down. It's like this guy's freaking unstoppable, and that's kind of what he did to be able to sell tonight. He just kind of started to like remember that he's like. It's like he forgot his superpowers, and then he's like, oh yeah, I can do this. And then he did it. And, he was much more engaged, but it's that weird lack of engagement that he's been in and out a little bit that I find overall a little bit perplexing. Other interesting oddity about this game was the 3-point shooting was bizarre. It wasn't just the Celtics are definitely in a bit of a cold stretch. They're about 20th in the league percentage wise. Over the last month, pretty much since like this point in December. Volume is slightly down, but they're still putting up about 47 threes, 46 threes a game. It was 48. I was trying to do the math on tonight as well, but their percentage is down. But it was weird. Like Denver didn't just win the makes, they won the attempts. And Denver is a team that actually shoots a pretty high percentage. I think they're third overall in 3-point percentage, really low in terms of shots. 3-point shots attempted on the year, and they outshot the Celtics tonight. I think when you take a step back and you look at the entire game, that's going to be the thing that kind of stands out is they outshot them from three, and you also had Russell Westbrook making threes. And again, you'll concede every single Russell Westbrook three you want. He just happened to make them tonight. That's kind of, I think, what kept it close for a little bit of time, almost kind of like a statistical oddity.
Well, especially in the first half, I feel like that's the reason why you look at the scoreboard. You're like, wait, this game is tied. Like you couldn't believe it because those again, some of those tough shots that were falling down for them, and then Westbrook makes 4 of them. But then going into it, you knew he was going to kind of have that kind of game where he's going to be aggressive, and at least in my opinion, I thought he was going to attack the rim more. But when he got the 3-point shot falling, I was like, man, maybe these guys have a chance. They also have Christian Braun who can really get going from there. Strother, he made a handful of 3-pointers as well. But I just think
you're so knowledgeable about the Western Conference.
Yeah, I know so much more about the West now.
Holy crap!
But no, I just feel like again, it just felt unsustainable. They can't shoot like this the whole way, and they didn't obviously. But at the same time, I just think a lot of the execution by Tatum and getting guys involved, to kind of like drive and kick. But it wasn't like one of those games where you look at the Celtics saying, "Oh man, they got it done from the 3," and that was the whole game. It was a lot of transition buckets. I mean, how many times did Denver didn't even get back on defense? I mean, Coach Malone he lost it in one of those timeouts, like literally just screaming at them on the floor, being like, "Get back! Like, what are you guys doing?" Like they're doing it over and over again. So I just think when it came down to it, they just said, "Okay, let's just execute. Let's not even try to." Get the 3-point shot falling or get so-and-so going. They just sort of played what the defense gave them. And all of a sudden there was a double-digit lead in that second half.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, it really all happened
that run,
there.
exactly. Yeah, the 15-0
right
run.
There. 15-0 run in the fourth quarter. Boom, it was 93 all with, I think it was 8:30 to play. And then boom, just like that, after Tatum got fouled on the 3-point attempt by Murray, which again was funny because didn't look like much of a foul, but Malone got baited into that challenge there with Porzingis and Brown daring him to do it. He got all pissy. That really messed up the whole flow for them because they couldn't stop the Celtics momentum. They couldn't really call a timeout. They finally did, but it was almost too late at that point. And it wasn't really that beneficial. So kind of a strange thing. I think he got into his feelings a little bit. And was able to.
But I feel like it's one of those things though. It's just like I'm gonna fight, and you guys are gonna hold me, you guys gonna perform at a high level because of this, and it didn't happen. Sometimes coaches do that, especially when the star's out. It's like, oh, if I get really mad over this one play, these guys are gonna rally behind me, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, it is gonna happen. Hold on one second. I'm responding to Amit. Sorry.
Look at these trader comments. Get out of here.
What's that? Are you a trader?
Leave me alone. I got a new job, damn it.
He's a trader.
People are making it sound like I left the Celtics.
Yeah, you kind of did. You kind of did. And we're still going to talk a little about OKC. We did a long ass show the other night, which was a lot of fun with Josue on. Nick was on earlier in the day. I jumped on after the Patriots craziness, which has just been bananas this year. But yeah, I still. Again, we'll switch it up. I want to get those guys' takes too. My big question overall is 3-1 road trip out west. You'll always be like, everyone will say, we'll take it. But like, I hate that. Like, I guess, yeah, you'll take it. But what's your one takeaway from the road trip? Is your one takeaway the 3 wins, or your one takeaway like, geez, they got emasculated by OKC.
What happened in that second half? Right?
And I'm sorry, that's if you there's you're only going to remember one thing from this road trip. It's not going to be the Denver win or the Minnesota win, or the Houston win. It's going to be the second half against OKC. Sorry, it is. Yeah. It doesn't mean that's emblematic of how the rest of the season is going to go. It doesn't mean that they're a bad team because of it. It just means that's the only thing you're going to remember walking away from this trip. I don't care about the record. Record is good because you'd rather win than lose. But when you remember this trip, you're going to remember that. That's going to stick in the back of your head.
Right. And it's less about the, blowing a 13-point lead and more about 27 points in the second half, or a dozen in the fourth quarter. Like what happened there? Yeah, for sure. And by the way, is this a pattern that's been going on this season with Porzingis? I feel like Porzingis always turned into like the let's check in with him about what he thinks about this road trip, or is that just because of what he said about the OKC thing? Like I don't know if that's a trend this year, but I feel like they're checking in with him again, being like, so what do you think about this road trip overall? Since you were such a tough critic about what happened in OKC. He called it stupid, right? Like we played stupid. So I feel like that's a lingering quote ever since Sunday's game. But again, you just look at the numbers and you look at the way, and going into it too, I was saying this, and it's kind of stating the obvious, but like, yeah, this is going to be the toughest defense the Celtics are going to see this year. And that's exactly what happened. But that second half, I didn't anticipate that, John. Man, 12 points in that fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Complete shutdown. So yeah, I think you're right. That's
people disagree with me. People disagree with me, but they're wrong, because they're taking it as me saying like the whole thing is a failure. And I'm not saying that. I'm just simply saying when you look back at this trip, that's what you're going to remember. And you're going to be like,
correct me if I'm wrong,
that's the thing that mattered.
Houston didn't really show up. You know what I mean? Like you look at the other matchups and you kind of, that's the one team. It's not just about the loss, but I feel like it was one of those, they were faced with adversity, and they just didn't perform. It wasn't even close. Again, the way that fourth quarter played out. Yeah, I mean that's easily the biggest takeaway. And again, 3-1 on a road trip is never bad. But when you look back on it, even a month from now, 2 months from now, that's what's going to stand out. Oh, that second half in OKC, 100%.
100%. 100%. Anyway, we'll get more on that a little bit later in the show. Because again, I do think that it matters, and I do think that while this was a decent win, I think we have to put it into perspective over what they actually did and who they actually played and who they beat. Because it's really not the Denver Nuggets without Jokic, and we'll show you the numbers to explain why. But again, earlier we were talking about Kristaps Porzingis having a really good game and also suffering, a slight injury scare, which ended up not really being anything big. But we did get KP in the locker room. We'll play some of that sound right now.
You can imagine what happened. Wow. Yeah, it was honestly pretty painful, I'm not gonna lie. So, but it went away pretty quick, so all good. I know it scared everybody, but all good.
Joe said this was kind of the most physical you've been, I think, this season. How did you feel out there? Did you kind of notice that as well?
I felt good. Yeah, obviously, I'm, it doesn't sound good, but like I have to play my way back into like good shape, and then obviously I can exert more energy on things. But I know this is what like everybody expects from me. This is what I showed last season, and now I'm just working my way back up. And honestly, tonight was, in my opinion, like one of the first games that I felt like I'm getting like close to feeling healthy, feeling good, and getting back in good shape.
How close do you feel being back to yourself again after that?
Probably like 85%. So I still have a little bit to go. Shot needs to calibrate a little bit better. Haven't been shooting the ball well this season, so there's definitely things I can improve. But I know that moment is coming when everything will start clicking, and I'll play really high level basketball.
So Kristaps doesn't think he's all the way back, which is interesting to hear. It's not the first time he said something like that way. I know you're out there and you're not catching every single interview and every single soundbite coming out of Boston, but he's definitely still working his way back. So we haven't fully seen it. I think that's always the thing. It's really weird, right, with this team. They are 27-10, and like that's good, but it feels different. It's not the same, and it can be explained away for a couple really easy ways. It's championship malaise, like the year after. It's really hard to get up for stuff when you've reached the summit. And it's every single championship team in the history of championship teams goes through this. You're bored. You're a little bored. And so that's why you see kind of 3/4 of coasting against a terrible Denver team playing without, Jokic and Gordon. Not quite coasting, but just not the highest level basketball that you're capable of playing. But also the starters, again, you had the first full lineup in a long time. They had nobody on the injury report against OKC. And you're like, okay, here we go going forward. And then what happens? Derek White, again, not an injury, but an illness. But they've just had the starts and stops have been unbelievable. But like, I saw a stat on NBC Boston, like their core starting five together, and that includes Porzingis, who hasn't played a ton of games this year, hasn't been together that much. And when they have, their net rating's been terrible. So like the thing that was their like biggest superpower last year, which was basically their starting five, was just fathoms, leagues better than everybody else, has been playing subpar basketball this year because they haven't really played much. And when they have, they've been a reduced version of themselves. So like, you have to feel pretty good that the best is still yet to come, because they're not even kind of close to complete yet. They're just going through the motions. And, for what it's worth, when the season began, we thought Porzingis might be out till now, through Christmas or through the holidays, and that they'd have to survive this stretch. That's kind of what they've done, even though that he's been back. Between him and a few other missed games here and there, that's kind of where they've been at. So I think when you take a step back and you look at it, you still feel pretty good about where they're at, even though it feels a little bit less than last year. And part of it is also that the competition around them is greater. Like, there was no OKC or Cleveland last year. The Celtics not only had the best record, they were playing so much better basketball than the next closest team. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I feel like that's part of it, especially the Cleveland part, right? Because, I mean, the 15-0 run was obviously historic and all that. And I feel like people just figured at this point it would be, a little closer, or maybe the Celtics would overlap them, and that hasn't happened yet, So I think that's a part of it as well. What OKC is doing, barely losing out there, out here, I should say, 30-5 and all that. That's another part. But at the same time, not seeing Porzingis always in the mix. He's missed a handful of games, or it seems like he's good to go. He's ramping up, and he's got to sit out and miss a game or two. I feel like that continuity between those starting five, they haven't really gotten that clean slate where, they get 10, 12, 13 games in a row, whatever. But at the same time, the Celtics have still been one of the top teams in the NBA. I don't think anyone is ruling them out to not repeat, or at least
nobody's ruling them out. And I still I still think they're the team to beat because people don't fully buy in on Cleveland, even though they've been
Right.
awesome. Yeah,
Even though they've been awesome
it's
in
still
the
the
best of 7
Celtics.
series, it's still the Celtics, right?
Yeah.
So I think they're in a good spot. I just think a lot of it just has to do with them just, seeing more of that more often, and it really does have to do with Porzingis, if you ask me, because I think that's what makes this team so scary when they're completely healthy the way, maybe not completely healthy today, but relatively healthy the way they were tonight, and just Porzingis just causing fits in the middle. We saw a lot of that in the first half against OKC. I mean, they cleaned it up. They made their adjustments defensively. Jaylen went scoreless and all that. That played a humongous role for the Thunder, obviously. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of teams just don't have an answer for when Porzingis is in the middle. And obviously with all the other guys, and when everything's clicking the way it was, and it's just too bad we didn't get to see, him go up against Jokic. But, I just think that plays a big part, when we're talking about what this team looks like when they're completely healthy and they're got the momentum going in the middle of the season like this.
Yeah. Speaking of Jokic, before the game, it's just, Joe, won't give. Joe was mean to Bobby again. Maybe we'll play that. Maybe we won't.
What is up with him, man? I saw that.
I don't know. He's just got mad at him.
It's like
Bobby's
he wants
been chasing
Bobby's got to do his homework now. You never know what kind of freaking.
He's got to really. You're not going to outstat Joe. Also, he's probably a genius. Like when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah,
like
but John, you don't know what direction he's going in. So obviously the ball's in his court. You think Gary Washburn saw that? Your article in 2017. No, he just pulled that out of his back pocket.
Well, I'm going to play it because it's funny, because that Joe goes home, does a little homework, and he's like, the next time this guy hits me with this, I'm going to hit him with that.
That's what I'm saying.
Because he had the Washburn thing teed up and ready to go.
Exactly. That wasn't something he just thought off the top of his head. He had that teed up, right? Yeah.
Then he had an expected field goal percentage stat ready to go when people were talking about defensive rating. He's got a lot of. I'm going to zig when you zag, which is great. But yeah. And Cass, I agree. All part of the arduous journey to get back to the title run. There's no doubt about it. This is the hard part about winning the title. It's hard to repeat. It's hard to maintain that level. It's hard to pretend that these games matter when you absolutely know that they don't. And it's hard to convince yourself that you can't just turn it on and go nuclear like you did last year, because you've played at that level with these guys already, and you have it in there. So I get it. I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying that, but each year is different because not everybody's the same player every year. It's not always, it's not guaranteed that you're at that same level. You might just not be the same guy one year after the other. There's natural regression. There's guys who are banged up, injuries, and this and that. So nothing is guaranteed, but the guys are still here. The guys who had a historically good season are still here. As for, and again, how hungry are they? Yeah, they're hungry when they get there. It's really hard to get hungry now. It really,
but
really
that's
is.
exactly. That's natural. It's January, we're not even technically halfway yet, so it makes sense. But again, like the fact that they're still top of not top, but in the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, like that's where you want to be. That's where you're supposed to be. You're not one of those teams that has the quote unquote championship hangover, and they didn't show that at all, especially in those first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season.
Yep, yeah, and again, they're still number 2 in the East, and they've got a freaking 730 winning percentage. So let's, there's certainly nothing to panic about. But again, if the standard was high last year because you knew that they were the best team and it was theirs to lose, and anything short of a championship, as I used to say in the cold open, was a failure. It kind of is again this year. It's not, well, we won one. Like, it's a team you expect to repeat. You want to see a run here. You're holding them to an even higher standard because you've seen them at the pinnacle here. And that's that. As for the Joe stuff, it's funny. We'll play it because it's funny. It is. But I gotta find one thing.
The follow up to Noah's question, what was it, like last week or so? That's the one that was just like, come on, man. He's like, oh, good job good luck trying to top that one. It's like, all right, you clearly loved Noah's question, that's fine, but like, why do you got to bring it over to Bobby, man? Like, take it easy, Joe.
I don't know. We're gonna hear Joe beat up Bobby a little bit when we get back. First, quick message from our sponsor,
This episode is brought to you
great
by
teams.
Prize
Hey.
Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's NFL playoff time, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot up to win 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks.
So here we are. Are you running your game on Prize Picks?
Always.
I'm always running my game on Prize Picks. You should sign up, as we said. NFL playoffs is a ton of fun, and I love getting in on this stuff here because it's just, the big boys come out in the playoffs, right? And the games there's a ton of games in that first weekend, so it's definitely a ton of fun. I'm not sure if you've run any lineups or done anything yourself here. I'm gonna take a peek and see if I can find something good. What are we looking at, Prize Picks?
What we got?
I like Lamar on the rush yards for sure.
Oh yeah. You know how I
I
feel
like
about
Lamar on the rush. I like
That was
Lamar.
that was my lone star. In fantasy.
Oh yeah. Tough year on the fantasy. We didn't even talk about it on the show. I didn't gloat.
Yeah, because exactly. I mean, I was gonna say if Jimmy won, he would have been talking about it. He would have
Oh my God, he would have been talking about it.
That's why he didn't say anything.
Yeah. For those who do want to know, well, we'll talk about that later. I like that. That's the
Have you
first
been
one.
talking about it at all?
Not one bit, not once in the show. That's the one bit that
that's
pops
why.
for me. Anyway, sign up here. I'll give some picks probably later on as we get closer to the weekend. But play 5, get 50 instantly. Download the app, promo code CLNS. Check it out. Yeah, for people who care at home, keeping score. Yeah, I won the CLNS Fantasy Football League.
Just rigged.
People might say, yeah, it was rigged. I gave myself the number 8 pick. I rigged it. You might say it was a wire to wire win. It was.
Yo, Ahmed came through, man. Ahmed had
I was first place the whole season. Yeah.
There's always that one team. And sometimes they win it all, sometimes they don't. Ahmed was that team this year.
Yeah. Ahmed took down Jimmy in the semis, lost to me in the finals on a late Amon-Ra touchdown. He had that in the bag. I got really lucky. I got Jaden Daniels 11 extra points in that OT game. And then I got an Amon-Ra touchdown on 4th down, and that was it. That's how it went down. We got those guys going in. I might wait for Bosch. I wait for Bobby to play this one. And I'll play it once.
We'll get him talked about afterwards.
So so we talked about this, right? Tatum, there's definitely a bit of an on-off problem with Tatum here. And, when Tatum has the ball in his hands more, overall, their record has been better. Bobby's been digging on this story and pulling up some numbers. He asked Joe about his usage rate, and Joe didn't like the question.
It's more usage, but is there any correlation there in terms of like when your usage goes higher, when Tatum's usage goes
I'm uncomfortable already.
I got a quick question for you. Do you know what usage rate is? You know how to calculate it?
It's shots and turnovers and free throws, right?
Divided by
What?
Possessions.
And so you could still be involved if you make a potential assist, or even if you get an assist, it doesn't impact for assist. And so I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is making sure that all of our guys are in position to make plays for each other. And there's obviously plenty of time where, Tatum has to be Tatum and he has to be aggressive. There's no question about that. I think he's one of the best players in the league at finding that balance of when it's time to take over and when it's time to give the game what it needs from ever that standpoint. We're obviously at our best when he's super aggressive. We're at our best when our guys are aggressive. And so continue to work that balance, and it's a credit to him understanding that balance of what it's like. I know that can be difficult for him, but at the same time, it's probably a useless stat because it doesn't count into his impact. He had 15 potential assists last game. That if those shot goes in, he's has a different stat line from that standpoint. And so I think he's doing a great job, regardless of what coverage that he's in, of making the right play, whether it's for himself and for other people. And when he's aggressive, that's when we're at our best.
Oops. So it wasn't that bad, but here's the thing. They're both right, kind of. here.
Well, Bobby's right in the sense of it's worth bringing up, but Joe, I feel like when Joe hears a question like that, it's, oh, you're questioning my rotations, or oh, you're trying to say, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, no, it's just something that he just wants to hear an explanation or hear further detail about it, and Joe doesn't like that. I feel like,
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, I mean, he's right. The formula, is it calculates assists, field goal attempts, plus free turnovers, divided by possessions. But you're right on the 15 potential assists. If a couple guys make those shots, his usage number goes up when he didn't really do anything differently. So that's correct, technically correct. However,
which is out of his control. Okay, I get that.
However,
Yeah.
that's an outlier game where Tatum had 15 potential assists as opposed to his normal 11, and only one converted as opposed to his normal 5 or 6, which is kind of the normal number. So that's a crazy outlier game, but you could throw that one away. But you've got this is how averages work. For every 15 potential assist game Tatum has where he doesn't convert, he's going to have a 9 potential assist game where he ends up with 8 assists. Like, that's going to happen sometimes. So that number is going to pop too. So there are irregularities in that stat. The main point of it is less about the usage percentage and more about kind of things flowing through Tatum and Tatum taking control of things versus, taking the ball out of his hands and doing other things. I think that's mainly what Bobby's getting at is this. More Tatum with the ball equals win.
Right.
That's basically what he's talking about there. And you see, again, more in the off that rather than parse over the stats, it's more in the, well, when he wasn't out there and someone else has the ball, what's happening? And the thing, it's not as good. So, Bobby, we were just kind of talking about your little pregame Joe thing, but you can jump in there if you want, or you can jump in on the game on the game stuff. What's going on?
Well, it was interesting. I pulled up the usage after the game, and it did go north of 30. So they're now just 3 losses this year, 10-3 when he has over 30% usage, 6-5 when he goes below.
How many potential assists did he have tonight?
I think Joe said like 12. So yeah, you get
his numbers around 11.
Yeah. So I understand what he's saying. I talked to someone else earlier today who felt similar, and it's a Tatum Brown thing. Like,
it's
Brown
a Tatum Brown
game
conversation.
slow.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's why it's so.
That's what we're back to. We're back to the conversation we had a couple of years ago, and it's the Tatum Brown conversation and the Tatum off and Brown
credit
on,
to Brown,
because that wasn't an issue last year, and that was a big part of their success.
And I think
Brown was carrying lineups with Tatum out, and that's something that hadn't happened in years prior.
Yeah, and I'll give credit to Brown. This was a game that was pretty representative of what I was talking about. Brown's struggling early, doesn't have it going. Tatum's carrying them. Brown takes a seat. Tatum keeps carrying it forward. He was so good early, and then Brown comes back around. He's trying to figure out how to get himself going, and this is just a my turn, your turn to it. The offense is still flowing Josue. I liked how they approached that side of the ball in this game. But it's tough when you have 2 guys who you want with the ball in their hands and can make great stuff happen with the ball in their hands. To sometimes share that, especially when Tatum really has it going. Or in some games, Tatum doesn't have it going and Brown has it going. And they've tried to flip those lineups and rotations to gear more toward the hot hand. And so that leaves the other guys sometimes trying to figure out where to fit in. And I think Brown's done a good job of that this year. Maybe not as good as last year where he was exceptional. But this is a good example because in that first half, he wasn't great. Second half, he found his spots in transition, found some opportunities to run some sets. And I thought closed out this game decently after a really slow start. So in the end, a good example of those 2 guys sharing the mantle. But also an example, John, that more Tatum, more aggressive Tatum getting his bag, just some nasty stuff from him, especially down the stretch. That's going to drive this team this year. It's a different year, right? I keep saying that. Last year, Tatum could share the wealth, take advantage of all these guys shooting like crazy around him, tap into what they're doing, and do less himself. And that's what you thought he was going to do again this year, John. I thought you thought all the stats were going to be down, again this year. But no, I think this year it's actually he has to be up.
I thought his scoring would take a slight dip because I thought he was going to jump up. I'm waiting for that 25-10-8 season from Tatum, and which I think is there if he wants it. It's just a matter of really it comes down to what do you need him to be or what do you want him to be for this team. I think he's trending actually closer to that, but they also kind of sort of need him to score because Brown's been inconsistent this year and missed a little bit of time. Porzingis has been out. You've had stretches with Holiday and White, a lot more missed games than you had at this point last year. So you're actually relying on Tatum scoring maybe more than you need to, which is why the scoring average is actually up this year. But he's been good. He's been aggressive. And he's been, he's really doing this on just one more field goal attempts per game. And that's, I thought the field goal attempts might come down, but they haven't. That's I didn't think he was going to score less for any reason other than I thought he might shoot a little less this year because they'd really share the wealth and the bench was playing so well and you were getting contributions out of Pritchard. And I thought but it's just been uneven, right? It's been uneven with the personnel that you've had on a night-to-night basis. And when that happens, you're just going to lean more on your stud. And that's why Tatum's been, kind of relied upon to carry the load, maybe more than I thought he'd have to.
That's what happens when guys are hurt, Josue.
Yeah,
I know, but I was gonna say, you think that's why you didn't see a whole lot from Jaylen that first half? It seemed like the second half continued from OKC in a sense.
Yeah,
I
put up a stat, Bobby. I don't know if you saw it that Grandy had tweeted on Jaylen.
No, I didn't see it.
Jaylen Brown played 41 minutes, 31 seconds from the second quarter Sunday to second quarter night without scoring a point.
Scoreless.
Banana stat, right?
So Dort took him out in that Thunder game, as we talked about, Josue. Russ did a pretty good job with him in this one, especially early.
Yep.
Russ was kept him out of the mix. Yeah,
Russ was watching that OKC game. He was chilling.
This was almost a game where Russ lights them up, and Gary's asking Joe. Russ was lighting you guys up. You didn't adjust. Like that's how this one felt early, and obviously he brought some intensity to the defensive end too. He gave them a boost in this one. I thought another storyline we'd be talking about, John, was them letting down with Jokic out. I mean, I almost expected it once Jokic got announced out.
Well, I'm going to
lose this game.
And this is another Joe being Joe moment, and Amit paired it with a tweet of mine, but I'm going to play it right now. This is Joe talking about playing without Jokic.
Yeah, and I think the proactive piece is the appropriate way to look at that. How can you be proactive? I think it comes down to just having an understanding of what they look like when he's not available. And you got Murray, you got Porter. Those two guys are top-notch guys able to impact the game. But it's really just everybody. So I think it's just really attention to detail to what their personnel is, how we can impact the game defensively, and what it looks like on the offensive end.
The question from Noah was, I think it was Noah, right? How do you avoid these letdowns? Because they've had them when the other team's missing their star. This goes back to like the Oklahoma City game last year, right? It's like, just kind of falling like, oh God, these guys can't beat us without this guy. And then you see the letdown. You've seen it with Trae Young and the Hawks. You've seen it a couple of different times before. The Nuggets, I think Zach Cox put this out here. The Nuggets are historically bad without Jokic on the floor. Minus 14.8 net rating would be the worst in the league by far, and the worst overall team rating since like the 2011 Bobcats or something. Who I still refuse to accept ever existed because I never said Bobcats. I just called them the Hornets until they became the Hornets again.
But they're also the other Hornets.
No, they're not. They're those Hornets. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Minus 14. This team is dreadful without Jokic. So, we can say what we want here about, threes not falling and this and that. This team is shockingly bad without Jokic, and that's who you struggled with for the first 40 minutes of tonight's game.
Yeah, 0.98.
So it didn't answer the question. The answer was, I don't know whether I'm not going to say they didn't get up for it. This was a dogfight with a Denver team that I actually thought played pretty inspired because they've been pretty inconsistent for about a year and a half now in terms of their play. Talk about championship hangover. They had it for a lot of last year. And Bobby, you were pointing it out a ton down the stretch. Like we were looking at them for a while. We're like, oh, this is going to be the team that's going to do in the Celtics. Then you're looking at them, and they were just getting some of the results they had in the second half. Like, how did they lose this game to this team with a full lineup? It just didn't look right, and I think Denver's a cautionary tale, the recent cautionary tale for the Celtics on a team that, kind of came back the same and weren't the same.
Yeah, and Malone talked about that.
And now they're reduced. They're down. They lost personnel over last year, and you're down Gordon as well. So I mean, they're very reduced right now. Yeah,
and the replacements just haven't been the same.
Yeah, and I think that best shot thing, I hated in the past. I think it's valid this year, and the Nuggets felt that last season as well, that you're just facing teams locked in. They want the game badly. Their attention to details through the roof. And I feel like that's how the Nuggets played tonight. It wasn't the Celtics letting down. You just saw exceptional stuff from Porter, Russ, of course, as we mentioned. Even some of the bigs, they gave them some stuff in this game, which they normally don't. For this group, they don't have too much depth there. They had to play a lot of Jordan, who faded in a big way. And I mean, that's where this game got out of hand.
I was like, that was rough when he dusted him off. And
started fouling like crazy. Yeah. So the door opened wide. The door flew wide open for the Celtics to run away with this game once the Nuggets ran out of gas in that fourth quarter.
I didn't know DeAndre Jordan was alive. Honestly, like I was shocked to see him. I'm like, oh yeah, 20 minutes. Oh my god!
They would love.
I may have Googled his age at one point. Yeah, I was like, how old is DeAndre Jordan now? I was like, geez.
No, but I liked what Porter did in this game, and Russ and all those guys came at you. Peyton Watson had 4 blocks.
He was
covering
great
behind shooters. The way they took away the 3-point line from the Celtics for large stretches of this game, they locked in. They're prepared. I mean, the timeouts were flying, John. They used all their timeouts by the 5-minute mark.
Malone was furious, man.
Malone is a funny dude. That guy's not long for that place. I think he's cooked. I think he's gonna blow a gasket. Yeah,
and they brought it. Like the intensity was there until it just dried up, and they have to play again tomorrow, so they better hope Jokic is back. But the Celtics, again, back to the original point, the letdown factor there. I do feel like they handled it well in this one, and Porzingis talked about it. I don't think you guys played the bite. He said that they were just burning from that Oklahoma game. So I don't even think they needed to reset themselves or, find some extra motivation once they heard Jokic was going to be out. I'm sure they had a pretty good idea that was going to happen too. So some advance notice, I think, helped there too with the injury report. This was more of a bounce back game from what happened against the Thunder than one where they're like, all right, Jokic is out. We still got to bring it. Like they didn't need that here. And I think that helped. They're just coming off such a bad loss. And defensively, too, I like the way they tightened up down the stretch of this game, piled up stops, forced turnovers. I do think that to take a story from this trip, John, the defense from that Minnesota game, which I love so much, the Houston game where they shut down the Rockets, and then, defense wasn't bad against the Thunder. That wasn't a problem in that game. And then tonight, I think the defense is turning a corner, and Porzingis said that too. He feels like the team's about to go on a bit of a run here, which I could see.
Bobby, what did you make of his answer to your question about the whole 85%? Surprise! Oh, my fault, John. You want to go somewhere?
No, go ahead. We're gonna hear from Joe after the game too on this road trip, but go ahead, Bobby. Answer that.
I thought it was interesting because you asked for a percentage, right? I think it's what you said.
Yeah.
He gave you 85.
Yeah, and that's where he's been hovering, right? And he keeps having these setbacks, but now he's starting to stack games. This was just such an important – I mean, he's the story of this game, obviously, right? The way he inflicted damage on those smalls. He did it at moments. Josue, you mentioned that when we were out in Oklahoma City. He took over for that second quarter stretch and just dominated the smaller defenders on him. That's what he needs to do here. And I know the post-up numbers are good. He hits tough shots. He goes to the free throw line a ton in those situations. But he's got to get back to being – a guy who just pulverizes small defenders when you throw them on him. And that's going to be an edge for them this year. I feel like they need it more this season than they did a year ago, given some of the limitations Hauser, Drew, and these other guys have gone through. He's going to have to be more of an offensive help for them. And this was the first time all year it felt like he took over a game and the other team didn't have an answer for him. And, to your point, Josue, if there's still 15% more to improve, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I just feel like there's so many teams that just don't have a response to that. Well, obviously coupled with Tatum and Brown and just so many different weapons, but he just causes so many problems. And when he's the way he was tonight, or even flashes of it, or overall, I guess you could still say it. Okay, see, I mean, they did a good job of adjusting, and some of those smaller guys just jumped the passing lane. It was just really disrupted him. But that's not always going to be the case. I mean, that's in my opinion, the best defense in the NBA right now. So most nights you're going to see this type of production, but he's got to stay out there. He's got to be healthy. None of these naggy injuries that's been about throughout the season. Sometimes I feel like it's kind of disrupted his flow.
Yeah, and you can see that it's conditioning more than anything. Can you get up and down? Can you be consistent possession to possession? I know they drill defense so hard with him, and I think he's been an impact guy in that end too. And combined with Drew, makes me feel a lot better with where the defense is at. And they had lapses in this game, certainly. Defensive rebounding was a bit of a disaster for much of this game. But when push came to shove, they shut him down in the fourth and ran away with this game.
Yeah. We're going to hear.
This is my couch. All right, it's fire.
I know. We're going to hear from Joe Mazzulla after the game on how he thought the road trip went. And Bobby, I think this is the story is, what are we going to remember? What are we going to talk about? Is it going to be a 3-1 West Coast road trip? Is it going to be that second half against Oklahoma City? What's going to stick? And that's really kind of what I have in my mind in terms of, how I'm going to look back on, what they did here. Oh, man, my light just blew again. While that happens, I'm going to quickly
John, you got to pay that bill, man.
No, man, it's a weird thing where if I put one battery in one side and one on the other, it blows. But if I switch it, it'll last me 2 hours. While I fix this, and while we get Noah situated to get on here in a little bit, we're going to hear from another one of our sponsors.
This episode is also powered by Game Time, the best place to get tickets to the games, events, and concerts you want to see. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Game Time is filled with terrific features like all-in pricing, so you know exactly how much you're paying. No surprise fees at checkout. You also get panoramic views from your seats in the app, so you know exactly what you'll be looking at before you buy. Plus, a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Once again, download that Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. What time is it? It's game time.
So checking it out right here, I'm looking at the Celtics. They're returning home Friday for a game against Sacramento, and there's some pretty good tickets here, guys.
Zion's coming on Sunday.
And Zion is coming Sunday. But just looking at this game, you get in for 98, but floor seats for 286 is a pretty good deal. There's some decent seats here if people want to come in and check out Sacramento.
Floor seats?
Yeah, look at this.
Wow.
Row B, Loge floor. Super deal. That's a good deal.
That's a steal. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Check it out if you want to get in on the action. Game Time is really great. We talk about it. You do get that price guarantee. If you find something cheaper, they'll match it up to 110%. But if you do want to go check it out, some really good seats available at reasonable prices. Obviously going to a game in general is expensive, but that discount could help you a little bit, $20. Download the app and drop in that code and get after it. Why not, I say. As for Joe Mazzulla, after the game, he did talk about the trip. Did I lose Joe? I got him back. He talked about the trip a little bit and how he thought it went, and he thought they kind of got better as things went along.
And how and what can you say? I think each game provides a different lesson. Tonight it was the ability to understand each other and to play for each other on the offensive end, and obviously continue our physicality defensively. Last game it was learning about each other and how we have to respect each other's space and be better on the offensive end.
That's what I say to my twins.
The Houston game, I thought we answered the call physically with
respect each other's space, girls.
On the other end, and then they're switching. And then the Minnesota game, playing against a great defensive team that's given us problems, winning a couple close games. So I think when you go on certain road trips like this, you're able to kind of just get better on and off the court as a team. I thought we did that.
Joe Mazzulla doing his thing, and there's Noa Dalzell out of the locker room, out of the Jayson Tatum press conference, and here joining us on the Garden Report with fresh, hot takes. Anything from Tatum worth sharing?
He talked a little bit about how he doesn't trash talk, but that he doesn't mind the West.
He did the too small.
Because they're friends. I know. And then he was asked about the too small, and he was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that I do." So you know, that was just I feel like Tatum's so on message. He's always so on message that any little anecdote that we get that's a little bit like off of message is always fun. But I think overall everybody felt good about this road trip, but there was a lot of we should have been 4-0 on this trip. I don't think they were aiming for 3-1, so probably similar to how the fans feel. I think everybody wanted to see them win all of these games, and that's kind of how they felt as well. But nothing super noteworthy out of this one. I think they feel encouraged by the effort, I guess, on this trip versus the stretch prior to.
I'll ask
you
you,
just
Bobby,
talked
this.
about, John. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask you and Bobby this because I got a little heat in the chat for it, and you know, I get it because people are sensitive about stuff. You know, when you say anything that might be perceived as you saying something about, you know, bad about my Celtics, but not. I'm saying if you step away and you look at this overall road trip, are you going to remember 3-1, a win over Jokic, a Jokic-less team, an impressive win over Houston, or are you going to simply remember the second half against OKC? Because that's all I'm going to remember from this trip. I'm going to be as satisfied as a Celtics fan. 3-1 is a 750 winning percentage. You win 3 out of 4 games. You win 3 out of 4 games on the road. You win 3 out of 4 games out west. You're going to be a successful team in the long run. But the Celtics aren't trying to build a good record. The Celtics are every game. These are measuring stick games. And that's the thing that I'm going to remember from this trip. I'm not going to remember any of the other stuff. I'm going to remember that second half against OKC. I wonder if you guys feel. I think that's the only thing that mattered that happened on this trip, because everything else is kind of what they should do. And in fact, Minnesota is a game they probably should have lost. And I'll say that's memorable in the sense that they were able to win a game that really statistically almost every arrow pointed towards a loss, and they pulled out a win. I thought that was a gutsy win, but you're expecting to, you know, beat some of these teams. And if you lose, and it is what it is. But that OKC one really kind of sticks with me for just how gross it was, I guess.
Yeah, and it depends how much you feel like they're going to see that team in the finals. And I know Noah and I disagree about that one a little bit.
I'm on Team Noah on that one too. I'm not worried about OKC. I'm worried about being chumped like that by another opponent. You know, that because last year that wasn't the case. There's no one who could do that to the Celtics last year. And really, it might just be a case of there's a couple teams out there that maybe can this year if you're not at your absolute best.
Yeah, plus Chet's not back yet, so keep that in mind, fellas.
Yeah. Take it easy, Trader.
No, it was eye-opening. And yeah, maybe that's a good thing for
calling
the
me
team.
Trader in the comment section. That's why you said that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe they see that there's a team they need to reach their level, that there's competition out there, that there's real threats, that they're not just going to walk back to the finals this year. And I do think they sense that to some degree, but it's hard to carry that intensity and that urgency through the year. And there's some teams out there that are playing with that level of urgency, you know, especially against them.
But they brought it against OKC. They brought that urgency against OKC. They just got chumped in the second half there. They came out, they looked great, they were smoking, and they took that game very seriously. So it wasn't a classic. I can write off almost any loss as dude, they won the championship last year. They get bored. It's the regular season. I've said that a million times about it. They went for it and they just got their asses kicked. I mean, it's in the second half at least.
So yeah,
it's just to answer your question, John, about what we'll remember from this road trip. I don't personally feel like the only takeaway is that half. I'm sure that doesn't come as a shock, but I just think ultimately, like, they were in a really tough position heading into this trip. This could have been an 0-4 trip, truthfully. Like, they had lost 4 of 6 against bad teams, and you know, you're going on the road against 4 really good teams. And I know tonight was different because Jokic didn't play, and I wish that he had, because as soon as he was out, I knew it was a lose-lose. Either they win and it doesn't matter, or they lose and it's a disaster. But
tough.
Ultimately, yeah, and I wanted to see him play in person. But ultimately, I think that, you know, this trip could have gone a lot of different directions, and 4-0 was. It's incredibly difficult to win all 4 of those games versus the number 1 team in the West, the number 3 team in the West, and whatever it is.
Yeah, but I'll flip it. Let's say they beat OKC and they continued on and had a really good second half, but had a total meltdown against Denver, playing down to the level of their competition and fell asleep here. I'd feel better about that 3-1.
I wouldn't.
I would, because I don't care
Well,
when
I
they
mean-
lose. I don't care when they lose those games where they just decided not to show up.
It's a
It's the
good point,
measuring.
John.
It's the measuring stick game.
No.
That's the team, because I can excuse a lot of the boredom games. The one that's a wake up call is the one where it's like, oh, you went for it. You had your entire roster there for the first time, and they just took it to you, and they looked superior to you. That's what sticks with me, because that's the image of the memory. It's not the holistic, view of the trip itself, because you're right. But if they did go 0-4, no, it would be understandable, but you'd also be like, what's wrong with these guys? So while it was possible, we'd be judging them differently. We expect them
But no, when two
win.
good teams play each other, one of them's going to lose.
Yep.
So
it's not just
they
losing;
play-
it's how it's that.
Yeah, but also
27
no,
points
you
in
got
the second half is what sticks there.
Well, I agree with that. I just think when you look at teams like Minnesota, right, like where they are now, are they one of the best teams in the West? I don't know. I mean, things have changed drastically in the Western Conference. Right? Houston, did they show up that night? I don't like. A lot of it can be, favorable for the Celtics in this matchup with no Jokic. On paper 2 weeks ago, these are like, man, those are some tough matchups, but things have changed, in a big way. So I feel like not only because what happened in the second half and the way it played out is it going to stand out the most, but I feel like, man, like that was a measuring stick game against the Thunder, and obviously that's not ideal. You scored 12 in the fourth quarter and 27 altogether in the second half.
Yeah.
Minnesota game was great. They dominated, but I just feel like, I don't know, is Minnesota going to be anywhere near the finals this year?
That's the
Probably
thing.
not.
Every
Like,
game
things
to
have
me,
changed.
Noah, has is always like, what does it mean? And most of them mean nothing. Right. That's the point. It's like whether it's a bad loss to a bad team or blowing out a bad team or this or that. So many of the games don't mean much because you can't extract much from it and be able to extrapolate down the road. The OKC one felt a little different. That's why. It's not that I get you. That the trip was a failure. It's just it
was a bit of a staggering game
where it's a little shock. It's a gut punch. We're like, whoa, that was rough. That's all.
I just think if the only games that matter are the games against the top teams, I think that's doing a disservice to the season because there's a lot you can learn about this team in games that matter less or aren't. Yeah, and then also I think if you look at last season, there was a stretch there where I remember people saying, yeah, this other team's really good, but they lost both games to the Nuggets, and they lost the one game to the Thunder where their stars were there. And, like, they had all these losses against the best teams, and everybody was kind of like, none of these other games matter. And I do think those games mattered. I care more about, like, there were moments in this game today where I felt like they were, having bad habits and things, and they won this game. Like, I'm still evaluating what happened in the second quarter today. You know what I mean? Like, that still matters to me, even if they ended up winning this game. So,
but it's not that. I agree with you. It's not just the good teams. It's what mattered in the game. Like if Peyton Pritchard continues to get shut out or struggling against athletic teams, or your bench is struggling to produce points, that matters regardless of who the opponent is. If the on-off numbers with Brown and Tatum are trending in the wrong direction, that matters. If you continue to go through stretches where you're not generating good 3-point looks or you're not making it, those games matter as well. It's always, like I said, what you can extract from it. It's not just simply the opponent. Where the only game I'm really able to extract something from on this trip was that second half of OKC. But you're right, there were moments.
Minnesota
today. And let's look at this game. What did happen there in the second quarter? Because you're right, like. This is the thing with the Celtics. It's not game to game. It's kind of quarter to quarter with this team where sometimes you see them within the course of a game look like the best version of themselves and the worst version of themselves, which again happens to a lot of NBA teams. It's hard. You're not going to play the same for all 48, but yeah, what happened there and what are some of your takeaways just tonight specifically?
Turnovers, defensive rebounding. They lapsed in some of those marginal areas where, the other team can gain ground and compete. And I feel like the Nuggets, obviously they went down 15 early in that quarter and then worked their way all the way back. But it felt like the Celtics had a pretty steady 6 to 8-point lead on them for a lot of the night, other than that big run back. The Nuggets just scrapped their way back into this game. And obviously Boston played a pretty aggressive defense, shading away from Russ to keep control on Murray, which in the big picture ended up working out. It almost hurt them early. So they stayed with that. I like that they went to some zone in this one too. And, there's just an unpredictability going against the Denver team without Jokic. Obviously, you threw the stats out there earlier, John. It's a horrible result when he's off the floor, but a lot of guys stepped up in this game. You ran into an unexpectedly great defensive effort at times in this game, and that allowed the Nuggets to run and just play exceptionally hard in this one. And that was what I felt like the story of the game was through halftime, though, is that they got outplayed, out-hustled, and shocked a little bit by what Denver threw at them. But they recalibrated. They made plays. They were in control into the second half. And I like the bounce back because we were saying it up, on Press Row, Noah. This was about to be a horrible loss, like unconscionable. But they righted themselves pretty dramatically in the fourth to where I do kind of write off some of the stuff in the second and in the first half and the lapses they had. Like how could they not have had those against a team that, Jokic goes down and those guys are playing out of their mind on the other side? It's not a super concerning half to me, like especially the way they responded to it.
I was just going to say, I mean, we've all been covering and following this team long enough to know what happens when the opposing team star is a last-minute scratch, right? Like, there's a pretty steady track record of this. And I asked Joe about a pregame, like, what do you do proactively? And I don't think he really, like, there's not really much you can do, right? And so to me, it's still a quality win to be able to withstand the fact that now guys like Russell Westbrook are empowered to turn back the clock and be one of the primary scoring options. And Jamal Murray kind of knows, like, we know this now, that NBA players are empowered when the stars are out to step up.
That was
and
a big part of it.
To the plate. And we saw it last year with the Lakers game where Austin Reeves went out, out of his mind, with LeBron and AD out. So while it's easy to, I think it's easy to say like this win is not super impressive. Like that second quarter, the Nuggets gave them their classic, like the stars out punch where everybody's playing at their best. And suddenly and the Celtics just had nothing going for them offensively too, just 20 points in that quarter. So to be able to come back, like we were sitting with some, non-Celtics reporters, just reporters on Press Row, and they were like, this is a professional win. This is like a business. You took care of business. It wasn't like they were playing lights out. There was a lot of things I think they could have done better.
Professional win is a good way to put it.
Yeah, the thing that stuck out to me is that this is the first game where I felt like Porzingis was like really asserting himself. The same, still obviously against smaller guys and mismatches and things. And I think things would have been different if maybe Jokic was there, but he looked a lot better. And this is 3 straight games now that he's played and he's finished. I know that's not a lot, but it's more than he's had at any other point this season. So that's one good thing.
Yeah, and that's where we began. You're looking at again what matters. Positive and and things that might have a negative impact. Porzingis
he was
matters.
really good at Oklahoma too.
Porzingis matters, and I know he said after the game he's about at 85% here, and I think that's up from the last time we heard him kind of assess where he is, which is about 75%. So I mean it's inexact math. He's just picking numbers out of the sky, but it's not like there's a meter that goes up the 7'3" frame.
He probably got knocked back a few points on that player on those shot tests below the belt.
Yeah, below the belt. Anyway, they
he would be at 88 if it was
88 otherwise. But he's that matters because we haven't seen it. And again, saying it earlier.
Noah's tweet cracked me up.
No, that I was so confused.
She goes something really wrong with Porzingis, and then
he's slowing down. Bobby doesn't even look like he cares. I was like, Bobby doesn't care about Porzingis blowing out his knee.
We all knew what happened, John, and
I knew right away. Yeah,
I was like, all of his teammates
Everybody
are not even looking in his direction. They don't care that Porzingis is done for the season.
Noah thought he tore his ACL.
Yeah, I was 100% sure.
I'm a little confused, to be honest. I saw the replay. I immediately, okay, all right, that's what happened.
I didn't see the replay, and then I went back and saw the replay, and I was like,
the Porzingis stuff matters for sure because that's what you want to see. He has not.
They need him more this year, John. Like you don't win this game without him.
Yeah, well, no, you don't. But also, you just haven't been really complete yet, and so you haven't seen them at kind of full health, full capacity, full power. And what's funny is everyone talks about peaking at the right time. The Celtics are kind of positioned to peak at the right time. You know what I mean? Is like they really are. If you're gonna have these bumps, and Bobby, remember in the beginning of the year, you were like, "Yeah, I'm not, not turning this back on you here," but it was like, "How are they going to survive?" And I was like, "It doesn't matter. Like they'll get through." Thinking Porzingis might miss all of these games through Christmas, before and we weren't sure
That's what
when
I
he'd come
thought.
back. I was like, who cares? Even if they have some bumps and they're the third seed in the conference at that point, as long as he comes back, ramps it up, and he's anywhere close to 100% by playoff time, fine. They're fine. So it does kind of have a vibe of like, there's a little bit of like, a championship hangover plus some injuries, plus, not really ever having all of your players on the court at the same time. Some things that are slightly more concerning, like Sam Hauser and whether or not he's ever going to be right. But for the most part, you're feeling pretty good. And I do think, again, they're getting a lot of these annoying, nagging things out of the way early. It's not to say that they're not going to possibly have any other setbacks the rest of the season, but who cares what they're going through in December, in November, December, and January? Look at the Mavericks last year in terms of teams. We get too hung up on overall record. It's really a matter of how they're playing as they're kind of approaching the playoffs and what they look like. And I think they're okay. Now, lost in the shuffle a little bit. One thing I wanted to talk about with you guys was Jokic doesn't play, and that's the headliner. And as soon as that happens, it's really the only thing that matters. You're not going to look at one team and say, well, this guy didn't play and this guy didn't play. But just stepping away from the fact that Denver wasn't without, the clear-cut runaway MVP of this season, and without Gordon, Derek White missing the game, low-key is always a huge deal for the Celtics. And I will posit that outside of Tatum, I think they miss Derek White more when he's out of the lineup than any other player.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. The ball control, and that was a problem early in this one. They were giving away the ball, and that's what disrupts them more than anything else. And it's not always the number of them; it's the timeliness, it's live ball, it's the ones that get the other team going.
Shots too. Yeah.
They're off. I mean, last year they're all small sample sizes, but we saw their record without Porzingis was great. They were undefeated without Jaylen in the lineup. Shut up, chat. But the record without White was actually the worst of all of the starters who missed their record with Tatum was actually outstanding. The record without White was the only one that was like close to 500-ish. It was like 7-4 or whatever it was. That's not the reason I'm drawing this conclusion, but for all of the stuff that you guys mentioned.
No, it's a fair takeaway from this one.
Everything connected, the way that he plays, the way that he just kind of keeps it all together. That's kind of my takeaway. He's super important.
Yeah, bummer too. I texted his dad, see if he was coming. He was like, we'll see. And I was like, oh, I probably should have known then that he was up in the air, but he couldn't even get out of his room today, apparently.
I was just going to say, I think like a big thing that came up today, both at shoot around and, then for post-game press conferences, is that they've only had 2 games all year with their starting 5 available. And so it's just, like Joe said, it's almost like training camp a little bit, like where they're at right now, where they're trying to kind of get acclimated and everything. And people will remember, like, this playoff run didn't have their whole starting 5 available. So it is a little bit back to the drawing board. And they've talked a lot of late about how teams are guarding them differently. Teams are more physical. They're switching a lot more. And that's been, I think, something that maybe, everybody's kind of watching the Celtics side of things, but not necessarily watching how teams are adjusting to the Celtics. So the same games that would have worked last year, the same game plan is just not working anymore. And so that's part of it. But yeah, they're going to need some time with their core, like, available for more than a game at a time. It was 1 game on this trip where everybody was, their starting 5 is available. And so
yeah, it's an interesting discussion because as we've talked about this year, they might not have the full cast. That might just be how they have to get through 1 game, 1 series, even a percentage of the run. And obviously they did it last year without Porzingis. Could be a limited Hauser this time around, or Drew not quite being himself for the length of the season, Josue. It's not the same team as last year. So if they get back to full health at some point and go on an extended run with the group intact, I think that helps a ton. But that's not a promise this year. And so whether it's the moves we talked about them possibly having to make, or just figuring out ways to win with guys down or play more consistent basketball, I expect, and Joe talks about it too, Noah, they expect to play and win and sustain with guys out. And so it's always a valid point, right? We haven't had our full lineup all year. The guys are in and out. That disrupts us. That's always going to be the case. But I think for this group, you do expect them to be able to work through some things. So I get it. I get why they're talking about that. I get that that's the reality of their season so far. But
they're also
I'm
26 and 10.
Yeah.
27 and 10.
Yeah.
So they have work
Right.
through,
So,
like it's not.
So they've managed it
it's
well.
not like they're losing
yeah.
all these games and they're managing it.
Yeah,
what I'm not going to do this year, John, is get to the end and just throw my hands up and say, oh, they were never healthy this year. Like, they're better than that. Their stars are better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, everything is like just a little worse, but not so much so that it's like panic time. It's just a little less connected, a little less, urgency, a little less consistency on defense. That's mainly the thing, is choosing when to play and when not to play. Don't say effort, just they're in a slump defensively sometimes. Sometimes they're just not there, but there's something there that is keep all the way to where they were. And like, they might be at about, Porzingis said he's at 85%. Celtics might be at 75% right now, and they're 27 and 10. So again, it's really not a lot to get,
I asked Drew what percentage he's at, and he's like, I'm a lot older than Porzingis. So I'm gonna need some more time. But yeah, they're banged up. That's probably the biggest reason by far, Noah, that they've played below their standard this year. But there's also been lapses,
but I'm not worried,
inconsistencies, and all the rest.
I'm not worried about like before they'd won a championship, you were always worried about lack of urgency. That's why you'd overreact more to losses. It'd be like, guys, you're not good enough to not try. This team is good enough to not try. Like, this team's good, like
they might get me, John.
And this team's good enough to, that they can elevate to a point that they can be the best team in basketball when they give their A game. And so you're not worried about any of that stuff. So all of those concerns, I think, are past concerns. Like this team and this roster. Yeah.
Because I remember, Noah, during those Cavs years and whoever else used to coast through their championship seasons, I'd always be like, oh, this doesn't look good. They're not the same. Even that Cavs team that beat the Celtics in 18, they almost lost to the Pacers in round one.
But it happened to Denver last year. Denver didn't look.
It's happened to every team since then, since the Warriors. And I asked Mike Malone.
Not just losing though. Denver, like you could have said, the Denver losses. The way Denver's playing down the stretch last year isn't a big deal. It was a big deal. They powered down. They ran out of gas. There was something to read into it. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. It does happen to a lot of teams, and you're right, Noah. You haven't had a repeat champion, but sometimes that malaise is season long, and that's what you're not sure of sometimes. So anytime you see a bump, you're like, they're okay, right? I still think they are, but yeah, go ahead with what you were saying with
I was gonna say, I mean, I asked Mike Malone pregame, like, about when you're trying to defend a championship, like, is the most difficult thing, because he really reiterated that one of the most difficult things is how every team gives you their best punch. And I know the Celtics have downplayed this because they feel like they've been getting teams' best punches for a couple of years now. I do think there's another level to it that we're seeing this year, even if they're not necessarily feeling that way. But he also noted that they won 57 games last year, and I think they won 57 games the year they won the championship. And if you actually look at their playoff path, they had a much easier path the year they won. And last year they came up. He didn't say this, but they came up against the Wolves, which
they had
we all
the easiest
knew.
path ever.
Yeah, they did actually. So there's also an element of, like, I think there was a lot said about the Nuggets last year, but a couple of things shake out differently. Maybe they're back in the finals and they match up really well against the Celtics. And so there's just sometimes I feel like we do this thing as media where we're like, last year all along they were the winners and we were looking at the clues, and then they won the championship and it was like we were right all along. The year before we saw the signs, and then it's like we were vindicated when they
but
lost.
Only one team wins.
And only one team wins, and sometimes it's just a matter of who your matchups are. It's a matter of a ball bouncing in a certain direction. Jaylen Brown doesn't make that 3-point shot at the end of game one versus the Pacers. They go down 0-1, and who's to say, like, what happens next after that? Maybe Tyrese Halliburton doesn't get hurt and he goes off. Like, there's just, and then, we're talking about they don't even make the finals. And so I just think it's easy to go back and right now to try to be like, is this team the real deal or are they frauds? Like, 2023 they were frauds, 2024 they were the real deal. And I think sometimes it's simplifying things when in reality right now they're a contender. There's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, and they're the third best record in the league. And I do think it's worth, like, evaluating when bad effort, or we're seeing patterns of behavior like the Pritchard stuff, or things that are like this could be a real problem in the playoffs. But I just don't think. I think sometimes we're trying to figure out if like are they legit or not, or are they like, last year's team was legit and this year's team's not. And I just think that sometimes that's not really like the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I don't know how
fair
to
enough.
look at sometimes other than what's in front of us. And we saw great stuff early. We saw stuff that was not acceptable for about a week. And then they got right on the trip. And it was a tough trip. That's what, you grade them on the difficulty.
A lot of the other championship teams, especially Denver, though, like you have to look at the way they approach their offseason. Like I just think the Celtics did the right thing in making sure that they brought back all their guys. It wasn't just the starters, it was also the bench well. And I think all that stuff matters when you look at some of those championship teams in the past, whether it was the Bucks or the Nuggets. Like the Nuggets just let a lot of those guys
in 09.
just walk. That's a perfect example. Like Tony Allen, guys that, glue guys or whatever. And then, even if Danny was still in the situation here in Boston during this past offseason, I'm sure he would have been like, okay, we're not going to let that happen again, And I think a lot of the time when we look back at the Denver championship team, that's going to be the narrative. What happened? Well, they let all those other pieces go. And then you couldn't just plug in random guys over the summer and think they're going to work out or pan out into another championship run or anything close to that. So I think that's a big part of it as well. And you look at teams like, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I feel like have sort of, they're much younger, obviously, but like they made sure that the building blocks that they had weren't going anywhere, and finding that continuity. Even the Dallas Mavericks did that to a certain extent. They added Klay Thompson, but they're also making sure that, they sort of built that kind of, chemistry and moving forward. I think for the Celtics, that's what you have to do.
I think it's an important point.
If you got the organizations willing to do it and you're not worried about the second apron and all that. Obviously, we know there's a time limit on this thing, but what do you got? Another 2 years? Why not? This is your chance to really go after it and try to go and be the next NBA's dynasty we haven't seen in over a decade.
Yeah,
the DNA is still there, John. Like I think the biggest difference is, to go back to how this conversation started, is physically they haven't quite been the same.
Well, if we're not talking about what we're seeing negatively or positively, should we all just pick different jobs? Like this is kind of what we do. It's like you look at the game, you assess what's important, you assess what matters today, and then heading into the future.
That's been the challenge this year.
You're not always going to be right. And of course, sometimes you'd be like, oh, it seems like they have everything. And as Noah said, you're going to run into a tough matchup, shrug your shoulders and say they just didn't match up well with that team. But I think we said that with the Celtics even last year. Like Indiana, I thought was going to be the toughest matchup. I predicted that series going 7. It ended up going 4, but it was clearly the most competitive of all of their series. That's part of what you're talking about too. Also, to Noah's point earlier, is like, what can you, not just looking at individual matchups against the best teams, how you match up against certain teams with length and who are athletic, who bother the Celtics and throw them off their game a little bit. And when you're getting into those types of games, how that's going to be. This is all, these are all data points that you're collecting along the way, trying to figure things out, as is continued effort, the health of people, how they're looking, whether they're regressing, whether there's any sort of issues that are that may pop up, later down the line. And we're all just making educated guesses on, is this a thing or not a thing? Right now, I don't think there's anything definitive you can say about the Celtics that would worry you that this team isn't headed back or on path or course to head back to the title. Outside of the only thing that's out there that's different for me this year isn't as much a concern over the Celtics, is that there's better competition out there.
There's better competition. And I do think that's
the different thing, is there's a couple of teams out there who are playing like incredibly good basketball, probably a higher level than you are last year. And that wasn't the case last year. You could look around and be like, there's no team out there that's going to reach this level. Right now, there's a couple teams at or above it. So that's a little bit of that changes the equation a little.
Your path might change too with that. I think what we can agree on, and what I've garnered from the start of the season, and it's not a huge overreaction, I think it's just the reality, is they were probably close to unstoppable last year, especially at full strength.
They're
vulnerable this year. Like, they have vulnerabilities. They're a little more human. There's some teams that are on par with them. They're not going to run away with things this year the way they did last year. And they could still become a championship team. I think that's the expectation you should have with them. But it's going to be more challenging. I think we felt that from the start. I think we saw it pretty quickly. We're almost at the halfway point now, and we've seen mostly great, a little bad, and I think it's just leveled out. You said it perfectly earlier, John. They're a little worse, just a little bit.
Barely, but not so much so that you'd think that they can't not only reach but exceed last year's level, which I still think is in play. Right. Talking about that ramp up, you guys paraphrased it a little bit, but here's Holiday kind of talking about the KP effect and overall just kind of how he feels about where the team's at.
I'm guessing he's about 85% back, but he looks good today. He looked really good. Obviously, starting off, knocking down threes, getting into the paint, got us that early lead, and him kind of leading the charge. Obviously, when KP's playing well, we're pretty tough to beat.
You had to deal with a couple things injury-wise this year, too. You feel like you're starting to get back to full form, a couple games back.
I hope so. I'm a little older than KP, so it takes me a little longer.
It's fair.
Yeah. Probably not quite there, right?
Well, I mean, you're chasing SGA around all games. Tough,
How do you feel about where he's at?
I don't worry about Holiday at all.
Come on.
Not one bit.
He's clearly not worried.
He'll be all right.
I'm not. Maybe he's lost 1%, or year over year just because he's a little bit older. I have no concern that Holiday is going to be everything that you expect Holiday to be when the games really matter. I'm not in the least bit concerned. Again, there's no way he fell off a cliff from the end of last season, and then when we saw him at the Olympics being one of the most impactful players on the floor, to like, oh geez, this guy's washed. Like, I have no Holiday concerns. None.
He was impactful on this trip too. Really good stuff.
I've no problem with him. He's the guy that's like there's a little Horford in his game in the sense that like the stat line's never going to tell you truly what the impact is. You might look at it and how many times last year would you look at it and be like, oh, Drew didn't shoot well today. I didn't even realize it because he was so good in so many other ways. I'm like, oh geez, yeah, he missed some shot. It just doesn't even register because he's so impactful in a lot of ways.
Series, man, I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Noah alluded to the Tatum personality, which we don't get to see very often. Here is Jayson Tatum, and again, that soundbite we were talking about. Does Noah look frozen to you, or is she just mad at me?
She's just zoned in.
She having a Josue moment.
Is that what you guys call that? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I thought she was just dialed in. Honestly, I didn't think it was your.
I did too.
I thought so too.
I thought she was pissed. She's like, I don't like anything John is saying right now, which is understandable. But that face, holy crap.
She's like, they're not a little worse.
Man, you guys holding it down too. I'm so glad it's midnight here.
I was
because it feels
worried.
like 2 a.m.
I was looking at Noah. I was like, did I say something? She looked mad.
If Bobby didn't mention it, I thought she was chilling.
No, just frozen. Noah, you're back.
By the way,
you froze the expression you had was like you were pissed, and I was like, oh, she doesn't like it. She doesn't like what I'm saying at all.
Maybe I wasn't.
Yeah, if you were just.
I just heard Bobby laughing from across the arena. No. So I knew something funny happened.
No, I'm throwing up the Tatum bite you were talking about earlier, showcasing a little personality and talking about his no trash talk.
Now, so you just cherish those moments where you
never freeze like that.
Play against legends, because it's something you always be able to remember.
Playing against a guy that talks that much?
I mean, it's cool because I know Russ, but if I got a relationship with you, if I know you. I go back and forth. So, I'm pretty close with Russ. So it's always fun, a few matchups that, a year that we get with each other.
Jayson, you say you don't talk, but you did the too little on Peyton Watson in the fourth quarter. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen you do that. Like, what prompted that?
No, I've done it before.
You done it before?
I thought that was Jalen's move.
I mean, it's never intentional.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of respect for Peyton Watson, right?
Of course, it's intentional. You inadvertently did it.
I think he meant personal. I think he meant like it's not personal.
Anybody takes on the challenge of, guarding other teams, the best player.
It is personal.
My body just does that.
You don't get scored on. That's part of it. But I can respect a guy that just keeps going.
He was great, Watson.
But I guess every once in a while I do a gesture, but
yeah, it might be too late. It might be too late for me to be playing Jayson Tatum sound bites. I almost passed out. I got Bobby yawning, and he's on West Coast time.
I've been trying to fight it too. I've been trying to fight my yawn.
Oh my God! All right,
for sure.
Two, and we did it. I'm proud of us. Good job, gang. Final thoughts from the crew out in Denver.
I was gonna throw in. I love the Cada stuff today. I thought they missed him in Oklahoma.
I mentioned that earlier.
I like the fact that they're
great.
mixing him in even at close to full strength and full strength on the front court. That was a nice boost, nice layer to this game. They got Springer in there for a couple of situations as well. This month you gotta integrate the bench as much as you can. Figure out what you have. Obviously, Walsh was out for this one, so you didn't get to see him. But Cada, there's room for him. Even when you're at full strength, I think there's room for bursts of him and what he can give you out there. And again, he just makes stuff happen quick. I continue to get, John, why people compare him to Rob in that sense. Like you throw him in there, makes a couple things happen, good stuff until it wasn't. Then you get him out of there and go back to some of the more reliable guys.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go with just to keep it going with the bench, because I do think this is important. I mean, obviously not just because of what happened in OKC, but when Pritchard is sort of a bit of a slumber now, like I want to see what other weapons these guys have. Obviously Hauser is a part of that. So I thought he hit a few shots, a few 3-pointers he got down. I'd love to see more of that, to be honest. Cada is another great example. Someone that you can throw the ball inside and he can score around the hoop, but not just on alley-oops. He had a couple of post moves that, had the other guy had his defenders going the other way. So I think all that stuff matters, especially when you look at games where, you're not going to have all your guys and you just want to strengthen that second unit. I think that's important, against especially the upper echelon teams, not just what happened in OKC, but also, Cleveland. I just think it's more important now than it was before. I think there's a deeper depth out there, and there's guys that come off the bench and give that type of energy. And sure, Celtics still had the great starting lineup 1 through 5 in the NBA, if you ask me. But it's important for guys like that to step up, to stay involved, because they're never going to know when the numbers are called, and you want to see them be ready. So, yeah, I think that's something to keep an eye on for sure, how that second unit evolves between now and, let's say, like the All-Star break. I think it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think overall, just being around this team, I think this was, we were anticipating this trip quite a bit. I think overall, you walk away feeling more encouraged than not. I thought Sam Hauser actually looked better today than he has. There was a couple of some things didn't show up. Yeah, some things didn't show up in the stat sheet. Like he had finished with 9 points, 1 assist, 2 rebounds, like nothing that jumps out at you, but felt like he was just moving better. He was a little bit more active. There was a couple of times where he almost, converted on a play, had that one nice block. But it seems to me like, I don't want to say he's turning a corner, but that's from a movement, like physical standpoint, that's the best I've seen him look for at least a couple of weeks now. So if he can build on that and, not have more setbacks, that's huge for them, obviously. But yeah, I think just KP getting through these 3 games, like I hate to say it, but yeah, he hadn't been able to get through 3 straight games this season, I don't think. And he looks getting there. He looks getting more comfortable. That's like my biggest takeaway here.
Yeah, I think it's all of it. Like the Porzingis
and Tatum's usage.
Did we talk about that? Did you got quiz pregame?
No, we did.
Yeah,
we put up the formula. But yeah. No, it's we did talk about it. Look, I think it's a legit, it's less about a stat and how it's calculated. It's really more Jason on, Jason off sort of situation, and how that's been playing. But we talked about it a little, but again, most things are trending in a good direction. I think the OKC was a reality check, but seeing Porzingis play closer to himself, Holiday post shoulder has definitely looked closer to his normal self. Any flash from Hauser is good. I'd say if we're gonna, Pritchard we didn't really get into today, but this was another one where he looked overmatched again. Kind of the version of Pritchard I don't like seeing, and we've seen a bit of it the last couple of games. But again, it's 2 games.
That was a big story in Oklahoma.
He had 20 points before. But overall trending, I think generally in a solid direction is, kind of returning to fuller health, which is good. So they close out the trip. They're back Friday against Sacramento. And then Sunday, we get to see Zion, who returned to action tonight for New Orleans. And I feel like we keep missing him, Bobby. Every time there's a Pelicans game, Zion just goes out.
And he obviously tore through the shoe coming to Syracuse when I was there, so I didn't get to see him in college either, which sucked.
It's one of the weirder
yeah,
videos
I haven't seen
ever.
too much of him.
Yeah. But so that'll be
I still
fun.
don't get
Couple
how
of
that
games.
happened.
Entire gang will be down Garden, locking that up. No Patriots for me, thankfully. So I'll be on that Sunday show. I'm done talking about those guys. But the Patriots coverage is rocking right now. We've got a ton of very plugged in insiders doing podcasts almost on a daily basis between Taylor and Greg Bedard and Andrew Callahan and Mike Giardi, some of the best guys in the business by a lot. Actually, the best guys in the business, I'll go ahead and say it, are all doing shows here on the CLNS Media Network. So you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the Pats. Everyone's leaning Vrabel. I'm still not sure about it. I'm still not sure. And I'm right about a lot. I'm just kidding. But I was right about
he's the former player though. Is that why?
I was right about Mayo getting fired.
You want you just want a new guy?
I want new hotness. I don't want old and busted.
No, I'm with you.
I want the new stuff.
I get it. Yeah.
I want I want fresh perspectives. I don't want retreads. And that's fine. Let's get out of the whole Belichick tree and move forward into somewhere else. That's it for us. Thank you to Noah and Bobby who have been out west holding it down for us on this road trip. Thank you, Josue, for pinch hitting tonight from a bouncy house in OKC. Yeah. And also at the game yesterday. And thank you guys, especially those on the East Coast, for staying up with us. If you happen to be on the West Coast or out in the Los Angeles area, oh my goodness, we're concerned and thinking about you guys. Scary situation going out there, so please be safe. Everyone else, we'll see you on Friday. Take care. No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, Don? We're gonna do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's fight Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about
I didn't order food, yeah.